Hey there, and welcome to a super quick follow-up tutorial. Because in our last little projects, we've already talked about Unity events, and events are a pretty powerful tool you can use in Unity. And what we want to do now is just super quickly in a small demo scene to show how events work and how you can even add your own custom events. So let's create a new project. Unity custom events. Okay, so here we go. This is just an empty example scene. So what we can do now is just add a plane in here, which is called our floor, and let's move it a bit down towards us, maybe 3. And then what we want to do first is let's create a canvas. Inside of our canvas, like we did the last time, panel. And then let's add a button. Okay. Maybe we can shrink all that a little bit down. Let's set it to top left and then make it a bit smaller. Just that we can still see our scene from here. This is just an example. So what are Unity events? As you can see, in this scene, there's this 2D button, and usually buttons or sometimes if you download packages like gaming packages, there are also colliders, for example, in there. And sometimes you can see these little boxes here. And this is, for example, one Unity-based event, and this one is called onClick. So what does it do is obvious. If you click on the button here, this event gets triggered. What can you do with it? So for this, we want to add a new 3D object into our scene. Let's call it cube, and maybe rename it interaction cube. And let's place it a little bit more into our viewport. Okay, nice. So we just have added one 3D object in here, and what we want to do now is use the button event here. So on click, you can do something in here. The list is empty by now, but what you can do is add an action in here. And then, as you can see, you can select an object. And what we want to do now is select our interaction cube. And then from there on, you have access to all the public functions the interactive cube has. So, for example, every game object has these basic functions here in Unity you can reach. So what we want to do is set active, and then because set active has a Boolean value, you need to put into the set active function, or you have to provide. And what you can do here is set the cube to active true or active false. What it basically does is setting the whole component here to active true or active false. Oh, sorry, the interaction cube to true or false. And that's exactly what we are doing here as well now. So if we click on the button, the interaction cube should disappear. Let's save the scene, test it out. And here we go. Okay, this is just a super simple example of how Unity events work. And this event is already part of our button component. What we want to do now is build our own custom event, because as you can imagine, these are super powerful for the gaming development. So if you have a big scene later on, you have a lot of, let's say, collider areas, and you want to trigger functions from these events. So if you enter a collider area, for example, a 3D object should rotate, or change the color, and so on and so on. You can use these custom events and then connect everything just here in your Unity UI. So what we want to do first is maybe copy and paste this cube and call it Collider Cube. And let's put this one a little bit more up, that it can fall down. And as we remember, if we hit play now, nothing will happen. So it won't fall down, it won't collide with anything. So what we need to do is add a rigid body here. And now it can fall to the ground. Okay. So what we want to do now is add our own script, which is called Cube Collider Controller, for example. You can name it how you would like to. And then it takes a while. Double click on it, you open Visual Studio Code. So now as we want to build our own Unity custom events, what we need to import is the Unity engine and then dot events. So now we have access to the Unity engine events class, and what we can do here is adding a public Unity event. Here on top, and maybe call it like we want to call it. In our case, what we want to do is as soon as the cube collides with anything, in our case the floor, this event gets triggered. So let's call it collider event. And now we want to add our collider function we've already used and created in our last tutorial. So void on collision enter. The IDE is doing all the stuff for us here. And then, yeah, if on collision, if something happens here, it's called invoke the collider event. So invoke means that the collider event gets triggered, and like we said, or like we've seen before, here whatever object and function is added here, this one is called in the moment the collision happens. So what we can do is doing the same we've done before, searching for our interactive cube here and set it to game object active false. Save the scene. Now let's see what happens. Yeah, as you can see, if the cube hits the ground, this function gets triggered and our interaction cube gets disabled. Okay, cool. So the nice thing is that you cannot just reach functions which are pre-built into the Unity components. You can also call your own public functions. So what we want to do here is, for the interaction cube, first of all, maybe we are adding a nice material. Create, because maybe later on we want to change the color. Let's call it interaction material, just as an example. Oh, misspelled it. Let's give it a nice reddish color and add it to our interaction cube. And now, just as an example, we want to add a new script which is called interaction cube controller. Create that one. click on it to open it in Visual Studio Code. Come on. Here we go. And what we want to do here is create a public function. Like said in the other tutorials, public function means that this function is reachable from outside of our class. So our idea is that with our custom event, we can later on call this function. And what we want to do here is this function has no return value, so it's void change material color. And then what we can do here is with game object, so this is our main object the class here is attached to, and then you can call get component renderer, and from there on we can reach our material, and then there's a function called setColor. You want to edit the color shader, and then you can just use the color object dot, for example, red, so that if this change material color function is called, our material color shader gets set to red instead of green, or as it's already red, let's change it to green. So back in Unity, takes a while to reload. Now what we want to do is in our Cube Collider controller, our collider event, let's remove the old one, so you can just select this one here and remove it. And now let's add our new public function. So let's search for interaction cube again. And now, as you can see, which is pretty nice, here in our classes, our custom class, the interaction cube controller class, is added here as well. So what we can do from here, you can search for your public function, which is called change materials color, and you can connect it here. Let's save it. And now, if the collider cube hits the ground, our material color changes here. So this is basically our first super simple custom event, which is calling a custom function we've created in our interaction cube. And you can do whatever you want with it. So like I already said, maybe you have a function which is triggering an animation. So if you get closer in a game, or if you hit a certain object, for example, if it should explode, maybe you're triggering a particle animation from there, or whatever. So this is really the base fundamental in Unity game development you should use to connect events and public functions. So talking about custom events, what we can do as well is create an event which which is sending, for example, a variable from one event to a function, and this is called a custom Unity event. So what we want to do here is on our Cube Collider controller, create a custom float event in that case. That means that this event always needs a float variable to send to our function. And so what we can do here is we need system serializable. Now what we can do is define our own custom event, and maybe we want to call it Unity float event, because later on this event will send a float value to our function, and then this is based on the Unity event class. Oh, sorry. And it's returning a float. So now you can do the same like we did above. Public, but now with our custom event, Unity float event. And maybe let's call it collision time event, because what we want to do later is, as a float, invoke the time when the collision event was triggered. So what we can do now is invoke. And as you can see, if you open the brackets here, it already tells you that you should return an argument or put an argument in here which is based on a float value. So what we can do is for now just invoke the time in seconds here. Okay, nice. So what do we want to do with it? Maybe our interaction cube controller, because we already added a public function here, maybe we add another public function. Return value exploit as well. Let's call it set time, just as an example. And this function needs a float value which is called time. And now you can do stuff with it here, but all we want to do is maybe just debug it out. So let's debug log our time here. Okay, so now we have created our first custom event, and we have our public function which logs out a float. So what we want to do now is our collider has the script here, collision time event, and what we want to do is connect it again with our interaction queue. And now we want to connect it with our interaction cube controller. And as you can see, it's already telling you that a dynamic float value should be put into this function here, set time, and that our event is returning a dynamic float as well. So as you can see, these are all just static parameters, but if we want to call a function, it should be a function which can handle a float value. So yeah, we can just select here set time. And now what it does, if we hit play, and we open our console, we are seeing, okay, the event got triggered, so our collider cube hit the ground, then our interaction cube controller set time function was called, which is debugging out the time when we hit the ground. As you can see, it appears here in our console, 0.56 seconds. So nice. Yeah, this is really a super basic example what you can do with events and with custom events. There are a lot more enhanced features as well you can use, but yeah, this is pretty much the basic fundamental you can use to, like I said, connect different objects with each other and to react on, for example, collider events or trigger events and so on. Okay. Yeah, thanks for listening, and hope to see you in my next course as well. Thanks a lot. See you guys.